My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Wilmington's Big Talker. I'd like to welcome you to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Sunday at 5 p.m. and now Saturday at 1 p.m. we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. In case you aren't familiar with me, I direct Grassroots North Carolina, or GRNC, since 1994, our state's most effective gun rights organization. As its director, I was involved in drafting and passing our original concealed handgun law. Since then, GRNC has gone on to engineer passage of concealed handgun reciprocity, our purchase permit bypass, Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground, the expansion of concealed carry into state and municipal parks, restaurants, public assemblies, educational properties, and much more. Grassroots North Carolina is exactly what the name implies, a grassroots collection of volunteers from all walks of life who share a common concern that our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms are being eroded. Check us out at grnc.org, that's grnc.org. The degree to which the American left has become violently unhinged is now causing at least one knowledgeable analyst to conjecture that a left-wing revolution is underway, particularly now that leftists have effectively occupied a section of Seattle, including a precinct building for the Seattle Police. Yet another left-wing mayor, this time Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan, denounced President Trump and his statement that if Seattle won't solve the problem, he will. She further alleged that the occupiers aren't hurting anybody. Tell that to the business owners being extorted. Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best disagreed, saying it wasn't her decision to abandon the precinct and calling the mayor's action an insult to police and the community. We'll have more on the implications of this later in the show. In our last episode, we discussed the legal aspects of self-defense against rioters, looters, and mobs with renowned self-defense attorney Andrew Branca. This week, we will discuss the practical and tactical aspects of self-defense against those same mobs, which you may find especially useful if you either live in or are required to traverse urban areas where less than spontaneous riots have and likely will continue to spring up at a moment's notice. Our guest for the discussion will be John Farnham of Defense Training International, who for several decades has been one of the preeminent defensive firearms instructors in the country. My wife and I have taken numerous courses from John, up to and including levels 1 and 2 of his course entitled Armed Response to Terrorist Attack. I can assure you that his school is second to none. But first, this just in gun rights news. The leftist effort to indoctrinate your children continues. The cancel culture is going after cartoons such as The Paw Patrol. Why? Because it portrays police positively, demonstrating yet again that the future the left has in mind for you is not one of free speech, but instead censorship. But it seems that gun control has now reached Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam. The good news is that Looney Tunes are back. The bad news is that they will now be run by the loony left. Yep. Executive producer of the new series, Peter Braungart, told the New York Times that, quote, "We are not doing guns, but we can do cartoony violence. TNT, the Acme stuff, all of that was kind of grandfathered in." That means frustrated hunter Elmer Fudd will get to hunt Bugs Bunny with a scythe. And no blazing six guns for Yosemite Sam, of course. God knows what other leftism the new series will plant in children's brains. Next, I bet they make Porky Pig gay. I guess when it comes to yet another American icon...
That's all, folks.
You might not have realized this, but according to CNN, the ability to dial 911 represents white privilege. Yes, according to Minneapolis City Council President, yes, Minneapolis of all places, Lisa Bender on CNN, calling the police when your home is broken into, quote, comes from a place of privilege. Maybe this is why Obama started handing out free cell phones, I don't know. Anyway, ignoring for a moment that I'm not aware of any 911 operators asking for the race of the caller, I want you to consider that this comes from the same left which has been telling you for years that you don't need a gun because you have the police to protect you. But apparently business owners can't avail themselves of that privilege, at least in Raleigh, when those peaceful, that's what they called them, peaceful demonstrators in downtown Raleigh started looting and burning nearby businesses. Debbie Holt, the owner of Clyde's Barbecue, called 911. Says Holt, and I quote, "The dispatcher said we will not send anybody out if it's going to put our people in danger." Oh. Holt described, continuing, "Look, I don't think y'all understand. We're not calling for the fun of it. There are blazes going on across the street. There are people that live around these houses." She said, "We called 911. We got nothing." Nah, you don't need a gun. You have the police to protect you. At least according to Mayor Lori Lightfoot of Chicago, who emphatically said, and I quote, "Obviously, we are aware that Illinois is a concealed carry state," which, by the way, is thanks only to a lawsuit. And she goes on to say, "and that many people have weapons at their disposal in their homes and their businesses. Do not take matters into your own hands. Call the police. Do not pick up arms and try to be the police. Call 911. Yeah. And speaking of the Minneapolis City Council, that would be the one which has voted to abolish its police department. As you probably heard, 9 members of the Minneapolis City Council, a veto-proof majority in fact, voted to defund the Minneapolis police. Or, in a CNN interview above, Council President Lisa Bender stated her intent to, quote, dismantle Minneapolis police, saying she envisions a police-free future. Although you probably have already heard that, and you probably dismissed it as just more left-wing lunacy, something that will never take place, let me tell you why it still matters. Never forget that in a political debate, as elsewhere, the extremes define the center. You won't see police departments abolished. You will see, however, the police being so underfunded and hamstrung that effective policing will become all but impossible. Take New York, for example. On June 7th, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio pledged to slash funding for the New York Police Department and redirect it to youth and social services, amid growing calls to, quote, defund the police following the in-custody death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. The result, of course, will be a new take on that old movie, Escape from New York. Right here in North Carolina, it seems that the people who don't want you to have guns want guns. Concurrent with looting, Raleigh experienced a spate of burglaries of gun shops. Since the weekend of the riots, 3 gun shops have been burglarized. May 31st, somebody smashed the glass and fired on the lock at Smoke and Barrel Guns and Ammo. June 3, it was Personal Defense and Handgun Safety Center. And on Tuesday morning, they hit Triangle Shooting Academy. Happily, on Tuesday night, police charged Jaquil Javan Sanders, 18, with felony breaking and entering in connection with the burglary. Those of you who are listeners of the Caucasian persuasion, have you begged forgiveness for being white yet? After all, the Cary police did just recently. In a fairly stunning video, which is available on TMZ, it shows police washing the feet of black demonstrators in Cary, which a woman using a megaphone describes to the assembled crowd as, quote, begging for forgiveness on behalf of all Caucasian people. For this, Cary police kneeled before the protesters and actually lined up to wash their feet. This, the site described as very Christ-like. If allowed to continue, this is your future, folks. I just watched a viral video of the riots in San Jose, California, showing cars stuck in a traffic jam on a major highway as rioters stormed the highway and broke windows with crowbars, trying to pull drivers from their vehicles. My first thought was that the SOBs breaking windows of occupied vehicles with crowbars were very lucky it wasn't me in the car. The second thought was that although the best advice is invariably to avoid areas of looting, sometimes the riot finds you. Our next guest will be renowned firearms instructor John Farnham of Defense Training International, who will discuss what to do if you are forced to go into those urban areas or other areas where riots might not so spontaneously spring up. Right now, you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker. We're going to take a short break, after which we will return with John Farnham and information on how you can defend yourself against rioters and mobs. My name is Paul Ballone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. In our last episode, we discussed the legalities of self-defense against looters, rioters, and mobs. Today, we will discuss the practical aspects of armed self-defense in those scenarios. Accordingly, our guest is John S. Farnham, president of Defensive Training International and one of the top firearms instructors in the nation. He has personally trained thousands of federal, state, and local law enforcement personnel, as well as civilians, in the tactical use of firearms. John has authorized 3 books on the subject: The Farnham Method of Defensive Handgunning, The Farnham Method of Defensive Shotgun and Rifle Shooting, and the Street Smart Gun Book, and is author of numerous articles about defensive shooting and tactics, published in magazines including Police Marksman, American Handgunner, Combat Handguns, Guns and Ammo, and Soldier of Fortune. His latest book, Guns and Warriors, DTI Quips Volume 1, is a compilation of his popular email commentaries. A veteran of the Vietnam War with 3 Purple Hearts, John retired from the Marine Corps with the rank of Major. He has been a police officer since 1971 and is presently a fully commissioned deputy sheriff, acting as training officer for the Park County, Colorado Sheriff's Office. John and his wife Vicki, who specializes herself in training civilian and law enforcement instructors to teach women to shoot, currently travel around the country conducting defensive firearms courses. My wife and I took several of his courses, and they are second to none. For the past several years, I've also subscribed to John's Quips, which accurately analyze not only defensive issues, but the problems facing our society. You can find John's website at defense-training.com. That's defense-training.com. Welcome, John.
Well, thank you, and thank you for that flowery introduction.
Well, I know you well enough that you and I know the real truth.
Well, the real truth is I'm the dumbest guy you'll ever meet, and everything I've learned has been by trial and error, mostly the latter. But I'm old enough now where I know a few things that work.
There we go. All righty then. During the pandemic, and now with the riots and looting sweeping the country, tens of thousands of people are buying guns for self-defense.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
In general, what is your recommendation to those people?
My recommendation, especially for all these first-time gun owners, is to, number one, join the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network, the ACLDN, Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. Okay. I'm on the board, but it's an honorary position. I get a free dinner once a year. But it's an excellent organization, and when you join, they will send you a number of CDCs, or I guess it's all online. I don't understand any of this stuff, but they'll send you a bunch of material which you can study, and it's going to save you all kinds of heartburn because it covers very thoroughly all the legal aspects, all the stuff you've never thought of, and then the organization will stand behind you when you're involved in some kind of shooting. Although our members, however, don't get involved in shootings because they take the advice, and so there's been very few. But that'd be one thing I would recommend. Also recommend you join the NRA if you haven't already, the National Rifle Association, of course. If it weren't for them, we would have been all disarmed decades ago. by these Marxocrats that infest Washington D.C. And so we owe them. They're far from perfect, God knows, but we owe them a great debt of gratitude. Okay. And then go to my website and look at our schedule of courses and come and join us and let us show you what you need to know. There's more to this than just learning how to operate a machine. There are very few people I've ever met who weren't able to operate a gun. I think I said this before. If you can operate a toaster, you can operate most guns I know. But there's more to it than that. There's a lot of things you have to know. How to interface with a criminal justice system, what you can expect, the kinds of things that we need to inoculate you against. And there's a lot of material, and you need to know this stuff. And so when you come to us, we try to run a very complete course. So we talk about shooting and we shoot, but we also try to cover all the bases.
All right. Okay.
And I'm certainly not the only competent instructor. That I hate to even mention my colleagues because I'll leave someone out. But people like Tom Gibbons, Dave Spalding, Mass Ayub, there's a number of other people who are very competent and they're my friends and colleagues. I recommend them all.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so now we've seen looting and rioting in most of the major cities across the U.S., unfortunately. What is your general tactical assessment for the average citizen? I mean, I know your recommendation is to avoid areas where you might encounter problems, but sometimes that's not always possible. What's your general recommendation for people, particularly if they have to go into urban areas?
Yeah, there's a number of things that, we all need to know. I think number one, from the grand perspective, these riots are orchestrated and planned. They've been planned for a long time, and they're planning on utter chaos between now and November. This is a political strategy on the part of cynical leftist politicians to seize power, and. So if you're wondering, God, is this going to let up? No, it's not. They're going to, they were very disappointed that COVID-19 didn't last. They were trying to get it to last all year, and it's starting to fade away. And now they're substituting rioting. Again, it's this chaos that they thrive on. And, of course, we're down here at the peon level. We're all caught up in it. My suggestion is, among others, when you stay at hotels, which I do, don't stay in downtown hotels, and try to avoid high rises. When I travel, either fly or drive, we stay at hotels that are on the outskirts and right next to a major freeway that leads away from the city. I recommend, either driving your own car or rent a car. Have control over your own transportation. Don't depend on other people. Don't depend on public transportation. You'll be waiting around while the riot's going on. Make sure you can get out of there the moment you need to. And then, as you plan your itinerary, at every stop, plan an escape plan. Have an escape plan. No, if the thing's going to toilet right now, how am I going to get out of here? Where am I going to go? When you hear orders to stay where you are, shelter in place, those are to be completely ignored. Get out of there as fast as you can. Remember, when some big company or some unit of government is advising you to do something, you can bet that advice is for their benefit, not yours. You have to continuously look after your own best interest. And, listen to the locals. Try to stay on top of the news, and you have to be psychologically prepared. You've got an itinerary. When I travel, I've got people I've got to meet with, places I've got to go. At any point, you have to have the ability to break it off completely, to cancel appointments, hop on a plane. You might arrive at an airport and find things are going downhill, and get right back on a plane and get out of there. And, you can get a hold of your friend and say, look, I'm sorry, but we'll have to schedule this later. You've got to be prepared for that. A lot of times, we're so wrapped up in our schedule, it's not that bad, and we start rationalizing like that. That's the kiss of death. You've got to be careful not to rationalize. Oh, it's not so
Denial.
bad.
It's denial.
What the Jewish people in Poland and Germany did.
It couldn't possibly be that bad, could it?
Oh,
That's not how
it's
the
not
world
that
works.
bad. And then, in the direct face of evidence, no, it's not that bad. It's worse. In the face of that direct evidence, they still rationalize. We're all guilty of that. And right now, it's a matter of life and death. And you've got to be realistic and look at the facts and then make decisions that represent your best interest.
Okay.
Of course, I recommend to travel armed. I certainly do. I sometimes have people ask me, well, where do you carry a pistol? Everywhere. I don't go anywhere.
We'll talk about equipment selection a little bit later.
And I when I travel, I almost always have an M4 with me, or a Robinson Arms. God forbid I forget to mention someone, but all these wonderful manufacturers that have been so nice to me, and they're all fine. But I like a rifle. I think it makes most sense to carry a rifle in .223 or 5.56 caliber, because no matter where you are, you'll probably find ammunition for it. Other calibers that you can argue for, it's all irrelevant if you can't find ammunition.
All right, I'm going to have to interrupt you now for a quick break.
Fine.
We will pick this up when we come back. Folks, right now you're listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker. After a break, we will return with John Farnham and more critical information enabling you to better defend yourself. My name is Paul Ballone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. Our guest today is John Farnham, one of the foremost defensive firearms instructors in the country, and we are talking about defense against looters, rioters, and mobs, precautions you can take, and what to do if you do find yourself accidentally in that scenario, if, of course, you are unable to avoid it. We were talking about some of the equipment involved. I mean, John, a few years ago after the San Bernardino shootings, with active shooter scenarios in mind, I actually swapped from a single stack carry gun to one with greater capacity. I guess that's an idea. That's the sort of thing maybe people want to think about. Why don't you continue what you were talking about with equipment selection on your person in case you end up in one of these scenarios?
It's very common that I'll get a phone call or an email or a text or something like that. Gee, I'm a first-time gun owner. What kind of gun should I buy? I said, listen, I couldn't begin to answer that question without an extensive personal interview involving gender and methods of dress and size and hand size and 100 other items. But as a general statement, years ago, I comfortably carried a 6-shot revolver, sometimes a 5-shot. Never gave it much thought. Then, of course, I carried a 1911 because all the cool guys had a 1911, so I had to have one too. And heaven knows I still own 30 of them. And I would have no compunction about carrying one. But I think I've said this before. I am no longer comfortable carrying around a 6 or an 8-shooter. I want a 16-shooter.
Yeah.
In the age of terrorism, where I've got a little more sustaining power than I had before. And that we could go on forever on this, but the bottom line is, this pistol you carry around, no matter what caliber it is, and no matter what flavor ammunition you're carrying, is a pathetic pop gun. It's got no power. It's got no range. It's not especially accurate. There really isn't much to recommend it, except they're small and we can carry them around. The idea that I'm going to, under a vicious criminal attack, I'm going to be able to stop this whole thing with 1 or 2 rounds, I think is wishful thinking. You might. We can't predict these things. But I like the ability to keep shooting when I have to. And so For myself, anyway, I've been carrying a SIG 320. Right now, I've got a copy of this wonderful Shadow Systems 920. It's basically the Glock 19, but it's very light. It's a wonderful, wonderful gun, and I love it, and I could certainly recommend it. But it certainly isn't the only good gun. There's 100 good guns out there you can choose that fall in this category. Right now, single column 9s are popular. The Glock 48, for instance, is the most popular gun Glock has ever made. A lot of people, particularly my female students, like it because it's flat. All double column guns are going to be a little fat. If you can get one on you, that's fine. I know many women who there's just no way I'm going to get a double column gun on them. It's just if they dress the way I did, it probably wouldn't be a problem, but they wouldn't be very attractive.
You know what I've been recommending to people, a lot of particularly women or people of advanced age that have limited hand strength, is that the new Smith & Wesson M&P 380 EZ, or now they have a 9mm EZ.
Yes, excellent choice. And Smith really deserves credit for jumping on with products that are genuinely helpful to their customers. And I can certainly recommend that. I have a lot of students bring those. It's a excellent idea. The 380, of course, is a 9mm Kurtz or Quarto. It's a short version, and we can argue about this for, and people do, and it fills gun magazines month after month. But like any pistol, it's a pop gun. There's not much power there. Just understand that, and understand that multiple fatal strikes may be necessary to bring this fight to a decisive end, no matter what caliber you're shooting. And we have to be fully prepared to do that. And this is a lesson I try to drive home with my police officer students and everyone who carries a gun. You're carrying a pathetic pop gun, and just kind of keep that in mind. And the idea that I'm going to fire this one or two times and suddenly things are going to look better is probably wishful thinking.
So you mean Joe Biden's advice that we should just kind of shoot him in the leg, and I guess that would only take once? That's not good advice, you're saying?
That noted defensive expert, yes. He's the same one that said we should fire our double-barrel shotgun through the door. Yeah. We can't see on the other side. You take his advice and you'll end up in a penitentiary.
Well, he should end up in a penitentiary, but that's a conversation for another day.
Don't get me started on this. We'll get off the gun subject. This is why I like having M4 with me. I tell my students, when you must shoot someone, which is regrettable, but when it becomes necessary, would you rather shoot with a rifle or shoot him with a pistol? Mm-hmm. The rifle is much more powerful, much more accurate. You have a much bigger reserve of ammunition. It's better in every way, except it doesn't fit in holsters very well.
Right. And when you say an M4, basically you're referring to AR-15 variants for those people who aren't that well versed in the
or Robinson Arms XER or a Kalashnikov. I don't want to sound as if I'm trying to sell you something. They all work fine. I get my hands on all of them. When you come to a course, one of the drills we do at Battlefield Pickup, so you can get your hands on a bunch of different guns, and you can see. Basically, they're a lot more alike than they are. Different personal preferences are just that, and they all work fine. But I can say as a general statement, compared with a pistol, they go down faster and they stay down longer. That is, the fight is going to end quicker. And if I must get involved in a lethal encounter, I know the longer this goes on, the more shot I'm going to get. And so when there must be a fight, the only kind of fight I'm interested in is a short one. Mm-hmm. And that's what the rifle is going to do for you.
All right. We probably don't have time for a lot of these, but let's talk a little bit about vehicle defense. Let's say you're driving on a highway, as we saw, and your vehicle winds up swarmed by this mob. Okay.
Oh, boy.
Recommendations?
Well, recommendations is, number one, don't go places where that stuff like that is happening. I think if you can, when you're driving into a metro area and you start getting hints of this, make a U-turn and get the hell out of there. And try not to get in a situation where that would happen. But when worse comes to worse, the general advice is never stop moving. Never stop moving. Stay in motion as much as you can and stay on cement. Don't get off into soft earth or things like that, because you won't have near the mobility and traction you do on cement. And, can I use my vehicle as a bludgeon? You may have to. I'm not going to rule anything out. Generally, you're much better off in the vehicle. For instance, if people start shooting at you, stay in the car. That car provides a lot of good protection. Most pistol bullets won't penetrate car doors. And stay in the car, stay in motion, and try to drive away. Getting out of the car and trying to fight in place is usually a really bad idea. Once again, I'm not going to rule anything out. But in general, stay in motion. Try to drive away. Try to find the area with the fewest people in it and just drive through it and get out of there. But by far, a fight avoided is far better than a fight won.
It's funny, you and Andrew Branca, and he from a legal perspective, you from a tactical perspective, both of you have given precisely the same advice. Don't be there.
Yes, Jack, and that's we say don't be there, and the second addendum to that is get out of there. You have to have the going back to what we said earlier. When you see things starting to go downhill, don't rationalize. Oh, it's not that bad. No, get out of there.
Yep.
And when you're with your family, we have in my family, among my grandchildren, I have a standard procedure. If anyone is uncomfortable, we're getting out of here. Anyone in our group has veto power.
Nice.
We're all leaving. No questions. We're going to leave now. Okay. And I think there's a lot of protection in that because they may have seen something you didn't see.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Now, we are running out of time, so first off, my wife and I have taken numerous courses from John, including I've taken the armed response to terrorist attack at 2 levels. Lori has taken the women's defensive handgun a couple of times, and these are wonderful courses. How can people find these courses?
The best thing to do is go to the Defense Training International website. It's defense-training.com. Go there. You'll see the schedule. You'll see quiz. If you haven't yet grown weary of listening to me, there's a whole bunch of videos on there you can watch. All my quips that I send out to people are there, and you can review them. But go to the schedule. You can, when you see a course that looks as if it's something you want, you can register directly. And right on the website, and you're in, and we'll get you in. Right
Wonderful.
Now, I tell you, these courses are filling up fast.
I can well imagine. All right, folks. Once again, John, thank you very much for joining us. Folks, this has been John Farnham of Defense Training International. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker. After a short break, we will return with more information better enabling you to defend your gun rights. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. About those spontaneous protests springing up around the U.S., please allow me to read some quips from a lovely little left-wing website I discovered. The outfit behind it calls itself Demand Protest, on a homepage depicting a photo of throngs of earnest students in some urban area with their fists raised, demonstrating something or other. The caption says, quote, "From grassroots organizations to advocacy groups, we seed the narratives and gather the audience you desire. When your strategy demands paid protest, we organize and bring it to life." Under the banner of unassailable authenticity, it goes on to say, quote, "We are strategists mobilizing millennials across the globe with seeded audiences and desirable messages. With absolute discretion a top priority, our operatives create convincing scenes that become the building blocks of massive movements." You're going to love this one. Quote, "When you need the appearance of outrage, we are able to deliver it at a scale while keeping your reputation intact." There you have it, folks, just like Michael Bloomberg's No More Names tour that rolled into Raleigh on a bus. What we have here is a demonstration in a can. These are the people whose efforts are pushing your country toward socialism. Remember when I said that this was the beginning of a revolution? Well, look no further than Chaz, or the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone in Seattle. You probably heard about leftists occupying a 6-block portion of Seattle, but I want to thank the left for letting us know exactly what a country run by the left would look like. And how are these lefties running their new nation state? Well, for starters, they profess to be loving and caring, but are randomly frisking people on the street. Forget about that pesky Fourth Amendment. They are also impeding free travel by demanding identity papers. Your papers, please. And best of all, they are extorting protection money from local merchants. Said one resident, quote, "It's like checking in with somebody to get into your own home." Chaz. That sounds kind of cool. Sounds like a guy you'd like to hang out with. "Hey, Chaz, can I have permission to get into my home now?" Or, "Chaz, would it be okay if you took those armed thugs out of my business?" Yeah, I'm sure Chaz is a great guy. But seriously, this is exactly how the left will run the country if they gain control. The other thing we can learn is how much leftist politicians like Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan care about the safety, health, and welfare of the citizens they govern. Never mind that people are being detained, extorted, and assaulted. Never mind that her own chief of police says it now takes police up to 3 times as long to respond to 911 calls. Nope, Mayor Jenny is just fine with all of it, describing the occupiers as, quote, patriots, and describing the occupation as like a block party or a gay pride festival. After all, their demands are reasonable, aren't they? I think there are 30 in all. Abolish the Seattle police and the courts and the prisons. Retrying blacks previously convicted of violent crimes might be a little difficult without courts, don't you think? Require that only black doctors and nurses be allowed to care for black hospital patients, banning evictions, socializing medicine, granting citizenship to illegal aliens, and obviously providing reparations for African Americans. But don't laugh at the nutjob nature of their demands. They are quite serious and quite dedicated to seeing that as many of these things come to light as possible. They see this as a revolution, not just block parties, but armed, violent revolution. According to former NYPD Chief Bernard Kerik, Antifa exploited protests to organize and promote violence in no less than 40 states and 60 cities. Says Kerik, and I quote, "It's a radical leftist attempt at revolution." Former Antifa member Gabriel Nadalis told the Epoch Times that to be part of Antifa requires 2 things, and I quote, "One is to share their violent ideology and be willing to fight for them at any turn, and the second is to actually do it." But communism expert Trevor Loudon told the Epoch Times that Antifa is only part of the picture, noting that, quote, "Every significant communist or socialist party in the United States has been involved in these protests and riots from the beginning." Loudon called the effort a terrorist military operation, saying the whole thing had been completely organized and long pre-planned. None of this surprises intelligence analyst Sam Culper, whose intelligence gathering service is called the Forward Observer. Says Culper, quote, "Riding on top of the protests against police brutality and the death of George Floyd is the socialist class war against law enforcement, capitalism, and the state. This is their revolution, not a singular event, but a process." Culper then asks whether what has happened meets the definition of revolution. Yes, he says, for a few reasons. 1. Their aims are nothing short of revolutionary. 2. The proponents of these political, social, and economic policy changes believe this is a revolution and describe themselves as revolutionaries. 3. We're seeing some signs of success towards these revolutionary aims. And by the way, Culper said all this before left-wing terrorists occupied Seattle. But all of this is going on in wacky leftist places like Seattle, right? It couldn't possibly happen here in North Carolina. You may have heard of James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, which did the undercover video that led to the downfall of Acorn. Project Veritas has gone on to do a large number of undercover videos exposing left-wing intentions and media's bias to the world. Well, you might be interested in O'Keefe's latest undercover work, this time with an armed left-wing revolutionary group calling itself Redneck Revolution, right here in North Carolina. In fact, the Project Veritas undercover operative went to a firing range with the revolutionaries, apparently in Charlotte. Said O'Keefe, quote, "Our latest video further demonstrates how dangerous Antifa is. This well-organized international organization is willing to engage in street fights and apparently prepares for armed combat." Now throw in the possibility, call that a probability, that the left will question the legitimacy of a re-election victory by Donald Trump in November. Notes the Forward Observer, quote, "Several Democrats have renewed warnings that President Trump will meddle in election results in November." Not really sure how that would work, but anyways. Most recently, presidential candidate Joe Biden said this is his biggest concern. To quote Biden, "The president is going to try to steal this election. It's my greatest concern, my single greatest concern." Biden added his belief that the military would forcibly remove President Trump from office if he refuses to leave following his re-election defeat. Culper says, and I quote, "Balkanization is the historical reference to the breakup of the Balkan Peninsula after World War I. These breakups largely occurred over ethnic and or religious lines, and many people, including myself, believe that the United States could eventually balkanize into smaller states along political and ideological lines. However likely or unlikely a catastrophic failure of the general election is, this would likely turn out to be an accelerator of balkanization. Folks, you need to be active, organized, and ready. Having failed at impeachment, the leftists like our own Governor Roy Cooper next attempted to sabotage the economy by keeping it shut down in the name of safety. But that too failed as the U.S. economy came roaring back even from the clutches of a Chinese pandemic. Among efforts to exploit the suffering of the American people during the pandemic in order to advance their agenda, the Democrats now advocate voting by mail. All in the name of safety, of course. Never mind that virtually every expert on elections predicts that voting by mail would be rife with fraud. Failing that, the left seized on the George Floyd murder in a coordinated plan to burn and loot American cities right up to the front gate of the White House. In our state, we face exactly the same election dynamics that handed Virginia to the left, namely Eric Holder and his National Democratic Redistricting Action Fund, whose Sue Till They're Blue campaign has allowed Obama judges to require political districts be redrawn to favor Democrats. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. This election is for all the marbles. If we lose this election, we lose our republic. My name is Paul Vallone. You've been listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, where each Saturday at 1 p.m. and Sunday at 5 p.m. we give you the ammunition to better defend your right to keep and bear arms. Please check out our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop, at hyattguns.com. Also, please check out my website at gunspoliticsandfreedom.com. Spell out the and, gunspoliticsandfreedom.com. See you next week.